Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Journey Radio Show, and we are the She-Squatchers. I'm Jen Cruz, your host, and I've got my trusty teammate, Tammy Dreichel.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Tammy. Thanks for being here tonight. You want to tell everybody why Janet's not here?
Jen is not feeling very well, so we're just going to let her rest for tonight. Feel better, Jenna. We love you.
We love you, Jenna. All right, so everybody send love to Jenna. Good vibes, good vibes. And I'm sure she will be fantastic later. Anyway, we have an excellent guest for you planned for tonight. He's come to talk to us about the Patterson-Gimlin film, you know, that famous Bigfoot footage of Patty. And so welcome to the show, Daniel. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, awesome. I know that we have preset questions that we have sent to you in writing, and Tammy's going to be in charge of asking you those questions. Yes, Tammy.
Oh, I thought I was backup. I didn't know I was the entire show.
Oh, well, I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
Daniel, can you please share a little of your background, especially in connection with the PG film and its location?
The location of the filming is Del Norte County in the extreme northwest portion of California. The film was shot in 1967 in October. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin went into that area because there were previous reports and they thought it would be a good place to look for tracks. I was born and raised in California. I found out about the film, I guess, when it was advertised in a commercial on TV. So that's how I became interested in the film specifically, but was interested in Bigfoot prior to that.
Okay, very interesting. And you've been out to that location?
Many times. In fact, a bunch of us were there on the 50th anniversary, October 20th of 67. And it just happened to be, I guess, that night and the next morning that it snowed there. It was the first and only time I had been in the Bluff Creek area when it snowed. So the temperature dropped quite a bit, and I wasn't really necessarily prepared for the low temperature. So that evening, it got quite cold.
Okay. How cold does it get there?
It could drop down to probably the high 20s. I mean, when we were there, what does it take for ice to form? 32 degrees, something like that. So it was something like that. It was very, very cold.
Awesome. So, you know, I've heard this a lot from people, and so I'm going to ask you, what would you point out in the film itself to those who say that's just a man in a suit?
Well, I guess I'm going in circles with one individual, Ben Radford. I think that's his name, a skeptic who writes several articles for Skeptical Inquirer. And he wrote just recently a 2-part article, and I'm named somewhat extensively in it, and he cited some of the work that I've done. And I don't necessarily agree with his line of thinking, Because in all of science, in experimentation, when somebody comes upon that eureka moment in science, other scientists want to know what the recipe is so they could duplicate it and say, like, oh, what this individual has done is absolutely valid. So that's why I say that, and I've consistently told people this, if the PG film, the Patterson-Gimlin film, if it's a fake, simply a man in a costume, then why can't anyone duplicate it? And no one has, and we'll just call him Ben for now. What Ben seems to miss that I pointed out to him in an email is that he asked me specifically, has anyone ever been down there trying to duplicate it? And the answer is yes. The late Eric Beckjord was there about 1982 with a man in a gorilla costume, with the same type of camera, a Kodak K100 with 16 millimeter film, not a video, film. I never saw the film, but one of my colleagues from the Bay Area in California did, by the name of Warren Thompson, who since passed away. He saw the film, and he basically told me, compared to the original PG film, it's like night and day. So it's like saying, it's like comparing a VW to a Rolls Royce. There's absolutely no comparison.
Go ahead, Tammy.
First, take your mic off of mute.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. The Bigfoot filmed was female. And I've heard people say that they can tell how long ago she gave birth by her anatomy. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no thoughts on that because I think that's all speculation, because how is one to know? The only thing that you can compare it to really for bipedal primates is us, because we're the only other bipedal primate that is like Bigfoot in the essence that we are upright all the time. We walk bipedally. So all I could say is that whoever is making those comments, I would say that's probably a lot of speculation. It may be so, it may not be so. We don't know the size of breast on a Sasquatch, whether this is something that is happening prior to birth or just after birth. So that line of thinking is all speculation. And so I just leave the people who want to speculate about it. My big question is, the subject in the movie is whether, are we seeing a Bigfoot or are we seeing a man in a costume? And I've answered that for myself a long time ago, is that 100% what you're seeing is a Bigfoot. And more than likely a female, based on the breast.
And did you think that there was a baby or any other Bigfoots in the film?
Well, that line of thinking before the internet first popped up by the late colorful Bigfooter, Eric Beckjord again. And he had made sketches of a baby Bigfoot clinging on to mom, if you will. And most of the serious investigators and researchers basically just kind of laughed at it. And he was always looking for attention. And another person from Ohio, I won't mention his name, had stated that in the background, in the trees in the back, that there's a baby Bigfoot. And the whole premise of the adult to walk the way it did was to get the people away from the infant, the juvenile, the baby. And again, that cannot be substantiated by the film itself. I mean, what is the term? Pareidolia? I'm not sure what the term is, but you could see anything you want in the background if you use your active imagination.
Yeah, pareidolia is where you take, it's kind of like your eyes are matrixing and just making things, making faces out of shapes that are in any picture. Okay, let's see.
I think that's a natural human phenomenon that the eyes always are looking for faces. I think
Yeah.
that's just a trick of the brain.
Even in clouds and everything, so.
Yeah.
All right, and then what is your favorite digitally altered version of the film?
Well, the one that stabilized. And I'm not sure who did it first, because a lot of the YouTube videos that are posted doesn't post a specific name as to who did it. I want to say M.K. Davis from Mississippi did it originally with black and white images of the film, and then other people did it with color images, but it essentially takes the jiggle, it artificially takes the jiggle on the camera away and gives the viewer, the people who are seeing the movie film, the subject walking on the sandbar, smooth and steady. And when you see the short clip where the best frames in the 350, there's there's 954 frames in that movie film, and around 352 is what everyone considers the look back sequence. So say from 350 to 360 in terms of frame numbers on the film, that's probably the best sequence. And when you stabilize that portion of the film and you look at it with an objective, neutral mind, you gain a lot of confidence that most people look at it and say, like, there's no way that could be a man in the suit. You just see the muscles ripple and everything natural about it, unlike a man in a costume. And what I would remind the people who are listening to the show is that prior to these two camps that came into play as the years went on in social media, there were, I guess, the believers, quotes around that, and the non-believers. But there was a guy in the Herald Examiner that was a newspaper that was published in Los Angeles shortly after the film. I want to say that article was written October of 1967, before the same month the film was shot. And he said that, he says you could see muscles ripple. I mean, basically what I'm pointing out is that there was no reference point to make comments about the film. They were just basically shooting from the hip because the film at the time was unprecedented. And so here this writer in a newspaper in Los Angeles said that, man, you could see muscles ripple in whatever is walking, and it gives you a lot of confidence. And another individual, Jack Webster, I think that's his name, up in British Columbia, interviewed Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, also, I believe, the same month, when they took the film up to BC to have it examined, and they were interviewed. And Webster says comments like, he says, man, what you see does not move like a costume. I mean, it moves like something that is heavily muscled. And so that again is where you get the confidence that what you're seeing is not a man in a costume, but the real deal.
Yeah, I'm looking at the footage right now, for people that are listening, and I'm looking at it, and I can tell by looking at it that you can see the muscle movement underneath the hair. And I really would like a close-up of the bottom of their foot that they just looked at in that picture. But I really am interested to see some more close-ups of that footage and investigate a little bit more for myself. But you can tell just from looking at it that you can see the muscle movement underneath the hair, and that it's not a regular human gait. And if somebody were to be faking that, they would have had to really be practicing at it. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. And at the time, between Roger Patterson, who was chronically unemployed, and Bob Gimlin, who was in between jobs, they didn't have a whole lot of money between them. So the idea that they drove from Yakima, Washington down to Northern California to fake a Bigfoot movie borders on absurd. Why would they even have to go there? Why couldn't they have done it just in the hills of Yakima? I mean, there's all these questions about it. And why would they, if they wanted to film, if it were a fake film and they wanted to make it really convincing, you film when it's dark to conceal all the imperfections in a suit, yet the film was shot in broad daylight in a bright sunny day, where if it were fake, it would reveal all the stuff that a costume has to offer. Yet what you see, there's not one hint that that is a costume. And I should remind the people that he's now deceased, but Johannes Prohaska, who was one of the early day pioneers in movies for playing a gorilla, or he was in such notable shows as I Love Lucy, and also on Gilligan's Island as a man in a costume in a gorilla suit. And he saw the Patterson-Gimlin film and made on-camera comments for the movie with Peter Graves, which was Bigfoot, the Mysterious Monsters, or the Mysterious Monsters. And he basically said that if that is a guy in a costume, that is the best costume ever, period. And he says, because it doesn't move like a man in a costume. And so that's coming from someone who is in the industry of playing gorillas on movies and TV shows.
Yeah, I think they would have had to super glue the entire costume to the body to get it to stick like that.
Yeah, and you would think that, or you would suspect that if that were the case, that the camera would probably have picked up all the imperfections, yet the camera does not pick up any and all the perfections. It picks up what looks like a very natural animal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm looking at it, and definitely, if they wanted to fake something like this, they have movie studios. They wouldn't have to like be out in the middle of the woods to do something like that. They could have created it. I mean, if you ask some people, we created the moon landing, the first moon landing, so they could have done a better job and had a different kind of background and do whatever they wanted if they wanted to fake it. I think they would have got a lot more clearer footage too if it was fake. So that's my thought on that. But I'm always team Bob anyway.
Right.
Okay.
So you mentioned Bob, so I'm assuming you're referring to Bob Gimlin.
Yes, sir.
So I've interviewed Bob Gimlin many times, and so have other people, including the late Rene DeHinden and John Green. And they've always mentioned to me that, well, we've always mentioned to one another in conversation when we saw each other in person about Bob Gimlin, and that his testimony is about as rock solid as they can be. And we were, between the three of us, we're pretty skeptical individuals, but we always had confidence in Bob Gimlin. Rene DeHinden and John Green had access to Roger Patterson as well. They didn't have too much confidence in him. They kind of felt that he was, if anyone would have done anything in terms of fakery, it would have been Roger, not Bob. But then again, okay, if you make the argument, if it is a fake, then show us the recipe. And so far, it's almost, in October of this year, it'll be 55 years since that film was shot, that no one has coughed up the recipes. Say, like, here's how this magic trick is done. No one has produced the recipe.
That's true. And also, why would they fake something that would ruin their lives? They took so much flack for this footage for years and years and years. I just can't
Yeah.
see anybody doing that to themselves on purpose. They didn't get fame and notoriety. They got ridiculed.
Yeah, and Roger and his wife Patricia had 3 kids, and Bob and his first wife, I think, had 5 children, and they got some ridicule, and also did the same with Roger before he passed away. And Bob and his wife, who worked at the bank, she got quite a bit of ridicule. So you don't fake something. The argument is that if they faked it, they probably knew they were going to run into loads of laughter and ridicule. And I don't see they would have walked into that trap at all.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they would either. We love Bob. We've met Bob on several occasions, and we love him very much. And we definitely believe him. We love you, Bob.
And so I wanted to mention too why the film is so important, or what makes it really stand out is one. And I was in Michigan last month in West Branch to give a talk about the PG film. There's a couple of things that really make it a great piece of evidence. Is one, you have 2 eyewitnesses. 2, it's in what you would consider known Bigfoot country. 3, prior to that film, there were reports late August, early September that Renee DeHinden and John Green went into that area to Blue Creek Mountain, and Blue Creek Mountain and the PG film site are basically separated by a ridge about 6 miles distance. And so there were reports prior to that. And so the next point I'd like to make is not only were they multiple eyewitnesses there, but they got a film of what they saw. And that's very rare, not a video, a film. And some of the film frames are actually quite sharp. And then another point is that the film subject left tracks. And so they filmed some of those tracks. So there's additional evidence. And then they made plaster of Paris castings of the footprints. So there again is one more thing as a piece of evidence. And then later that month, Bob Titmus comes in and casts 10 or 11, maybe even 12 consecutive casts, right, left, from the PG film site. And so the film was shot Friday, October 20th. By Monday, October 23rd, Lyle Laverty, who was in the area as a timber management assistant, and his crew found the film site and were able to verify that footprints were on that film site. And in several interviews with me, he said nothing looked like it was contrived. And I spoke with another individual who was there early November. He's now deceased, Richard Henry, who was on that film site in November 5th of 67 with Jim McLaren. And again, he told me in a taped interview, he said, if the trackway were fake, because by then the subject is gone and everything is gone, but he was able to see the trackway, he says he could not conceive in his mind any way how they could have faked those tracks. So even the tracks that were left behind to Richard Henry, who was an outdoorsman, looked very natural to him.
Yeah,
So,
did you know, did anybody ever mention, did any of the loggers that you interviewed, did any of them say anything about having any experiences?
No. In fact, I haven't met a whole lot of loggers in that area that have had sightings. In fact, I can't think of a single one.
I was curious about that. On one hand, they could just run away because there's loggers there and they're destroying everything, and they could be trying to get out of there. But on the other hand, they would be out there more than most people. So I was curious about that.
Yeah. But
I'm just going to add really quick that I was with Russell Acord at the Minnesota Bigfoot Conference last year, and he did a special treat of sharing a film that he's been working on for Bob Gimlin, which is supposed to be released, I think, after he passes, but I'm not sure. But it is a gorgeous film that tells the story of the filming and from Bob's viewpoint. And there was talk of the loggers that were having trouble prior to that. So in that film there was anyway. So I was just going to add that. Go ahead. I'm going back on mute.
Okay, I guess the other question is, how is it different between then and now after the film being digitally stabilized? Do you think that it removes more doubt, or do you think it adds more doubt?
I think if anything, it removes doubt, because when I was a teenager looking at the film, I'm 59 today, but when I was a teenager, when the film was projected or shown on TV, I took my parents' movie camera and filmed the film on TV, and then I saw it on a projector, and you could see the jiggle, the camera jiggle. And I always thought to myself, I wonder how the film would look if they kind of stabilized it. And at the time, I was no computer whiz or anything like that, and I'm still not a computer whiz. But I said it would be neat that one day that they could take the jiggle out of the camera, and by golly, they've done it. And so, in my view, it gives people a lot more confidence that what you're seeing there is simply a Bigfoot and not a man in a costume. And one of the key points that the late investigator Renee DeHinden has pointed out is that when the subject in the film walks, the subject does not walk like a man. It's very different. You could superficially you could say, oh, it's walking just like a man, but technically and analytically, it does not walk like a man. It's moving its lower leg almost at a right angle to the upper leg, and that's absolutely atypical as to how modern man walks. And it does this throughout the entire sequence of being filmed. And so it's a very unique walk, and it's very different than man. Renee DeHinden once said that perhaps they walk in that fashion because it's ideal for clearing brush. Because instead of just walking into the brush, you're lifting your lower leg to a point where it's going to clear the brush every time it walks. So I don't know, but that was his idea.
Well, and I'm sure that the terrain was not flat and level. I'm sure they had to step over branches and whatnot on the ground anyway.
Yeah, one thing about the PG film site that most people don't realize is that that specific area was logged, and you could see it in the film that the stumps that are there. So it was somewhat artificially cleared out before because they were logging in that area. And it also, I believe, was a turnaround point for the 18-wheelers the 18-wheeler trucks that they got in that area, because it's big and wide. They would drive down the old Bluff Creek Road and make a turn right there on the film site and go back the opposite direction. And I have photos that would suggest that this was the case, because it looks like there's tire tracks there. And this is around June of 68, when John Green was there to do his analysis. And it looks like, oh, that certainly looks like a tire track. And these pictures were shot by the late George Haas. And so that area, two things that happened to it. They logged it, and there was a big flood in 64 that cleared away a lot of the debris and also piled up a lot of debris. And so that's why on the film site, you see certain areas where there's a lot of debris piled up. And that was from the big flood of 64.
That makes sense. I would think there'd definitely be some roots there. Okay,
Yeah.
well, it is time for our commercial break. So everybody stay tuned and we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Okay, so we're on break now, and that was the end of our questions. So what would you like us to do, Daniel?
For the second half.
Well, I would say freestyle it because I'm sure you probably have lots of questions because I've been Bigfooting longer than most people have been living. And so you might have a lot.
I ask questions about your collection of information?
You can ask anything.
Okay. I just want to make sure because I've read that in your bio. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about, Minnesota Iceman, Florida skunk ape, certain researchers, the worldwide scene, whether there's multiple species, the Yeti, the Yowie, the television shows, social media, websites. Yeah. Paul Freeman.
Okay, Tammy, are you watching the chat room? Because Sarge is going to put the go in there when the show's back on the air.
Yeah, but you should do that part with all the Instagrams and stuff like that.
I will try, but you might have to. We've got some seconds left here. Mm-hmm.
And if you want to ask about the newsletter, that's fine too.
Awesome. I did put the go ahead in the chat room to have the people ask questions if they'd like to. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hey, this is the Journey Radio Show, and we're the She-Squatchers. Won't you check us out online at she-squatchers.com? And right there, you can check on our events page. We don't have all of our events on there because some of them are still in negotiations, but we've got some more in the works that are quite exciting. But coming up in a few weeks, we're going to be in Meadowline Falls, Washington at the Meadowline Falls Bigfoot Festival. Won't you come out and see us there? I know we'd all like to see you. Ron Moorhead, David Paulides, Amy Boo, and Project Zoobook, and many more are going to be there. So come out and see us. All three of us She-Squatchers will be there, or be square with us. So, hey, we're on YouTube. Would you please come subscribe to our channel at She-Squatchers Official? We are in a subscribers race with another YouTuber, and we want to win. We want to win so bad. We want to stomp him. So help us win by subscribing to our channel. And hey, we're on Facebook and Instagram. Please like and follow us there for all the latest of what's going on with our team. And we're back to the show. Tammy's doing a great job running things here tonight. Yay, Tammy. And I'm going to let her have the show back and be in charge as she brings Daniel Perez back in from the break.
Okay, well, I do have one question from the chat room. The question is, why has a body never been found, in your opinion?
Let's just put it this way. I think in 1941 or 1942, there was a body, but the guy has since passed on, and his name was Paul Shibaga. I believe the late Dr. John Bindernagel interviewed him. I'm not sure exactly what he thought of the interview, but a fellow by the name of John Worms from Canada did a videotaped deposition with him before he passed away. And he said he was an immigrant to Canada. I think he was about 17 years old. They were out moose hunting. They were actually poaching because they said they had no money and came from a large family, and that they were just trying to put some food on the table. And so he separated from his hunting party, and he thought he saw a moose in the bush, and he took a shot, and there was a blood trail, and he followed the blood trail because the thing took off. And apparently he hit it right in the spine, and that he eventually caught up to the moose. And then when he saw the moose, it wasn't a moose, it was what I guess you would call a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot. And he got close up to it, and I think he said on camera, "Holy bucket," and something to the effect that if something like this existed, why doesn't the world know about this? But he was scared because he didn't know what he shot and killed. But that's his story. And I saw the videotape that John did, and it's very compelling. And he's an old man by the time he did the interview, and he basically looks in the camera and he says, "This is what happened. If you believe me, that's great. If you don't, I really don't care because I'm about to die and it doesn't matter anymore. I just wanted to get this off my chest." But back then in 1941, 42, the whole matter of Sasquatch Bigfoot may have been resolved, but because this teenager was unsure of what he killed, he basically just kept it a secret, because if he was the only person that witnessed it, there was no one there to go against his word.
So what did he say what he did with the body?
He didn't do anything with it. It was too big to move.
But he just left it there?
He just left it there and walked away. And when he got back to his hunting party, I don't think he told anyone. He was just too scared. And because he didn't know whether he shot a man that was hairy. And again, he was an immigrant to the country. He was from Europe, and he was poaching. He was illegally hunting. And I think the area was in Basket Lake, Manitoba. And thanks to John Worms, he did a very good videotape of him. And I saw the videotape, I think, around 2018. And I was very, very impressed by the testimony. So when people say, well, where's the body? I think there was an opportunity to have collected a body, but like the circumstances I just told you about, he was so scared that maybe they were going to prosecute him. He just walked away and zippered his mouth.
Yeah, that would make sense. And another question in the chat room was, can't you just catch one with a sleepy dart, with a tranquilizer dart?
Well, first you have to see one. And
sure,
that is always a possibility, but it's not like every day that someone can walk out of their home and make an appointment with a Sasquatch. That just does not happen. And the people who say that they could see a Sasquatch at will, frankly, I'm skeptical.
That makes sense. Okay, so I have a question then. Do you think that there are different species of Bigfoot or one Bigfoot, or what are your views on that?
Well, early on, when the problem of Bigfoot became apparent here in North America, several people, including the main researcher, Lauren Coleman, postulated that there might possibly be multiple species here in North America. And some of the descriptions of the things they're seeing in Florida compared to what they're seeing up in Washington and Alaska are very different. And so if there's a subspecies, it wouldn't surprise me the least bit.
Yeah, there's even sightings all over the world. I know that there's been sightings in Scotland too, and over there they're gray. They call them the big gray man of Ben McDewey. So they come in all sizes and all colors. They said that one's 15 to 20 feet tall. Okay, and then also I think that I've heard that you have the biggest collection of Bigfoot research in the world. Is that true?
That would have to be true unless someone were to try to compete with me, and I'd say, well, okay, show me what you got. I'll show you what I got. And so I've got 3 bedrooms full of mostly paper physical files. And so how this came about, I started collecting when I was a youngster. My dad took the newspaper, and so when there was a Bigfoot article, I would cut it out, and I had a J.C. Penney shoebox, and I'd start putting the clippings in the shoebox. And so as I got older, I eventually got a filing cabinet, started putting all my stuff in a filing cabinet. And so, long story short, is another investigator in the Bay Area of California by the name of Warren Thompson inherited the late George Haas's Bigfoot material. And George, for those of you who don't know, published a newsletter called the Bigfoot Bulletin back in the 60s. And he was one of the original pioneers of Bigfooting. And so all the data that he collected when he passed on went to Warren Thompson. So Warren Thompson's collection started building up. And so when Warren Thompson passed away, that collection came to me. So all of a sudden I had my own pretty substantial collection to having all this additional information. Much of it I haven't even gone through in terms of like audio tapes, pictures, files, classified material. And it's the largest physical collection of files in the world. And so they're here with me, the editor and publisher of the Bigfoot Times newsletter.
Yeah, so tell us about that. You have your own newsletter.
I started the newsletter in January of 1998. And so in January of 2023, it'll be 25 years old. It's a printed publication that goes out to members all over the world. We've got people in Australia, in Europe, in the United Kingdom, in Spain, Canada, just all over who subscribe to the newsletter. And so back in the late 90s, the internet or the World Wide Web was slowly starting to take over print media. But at that time, there were a couple of publications on Bigfoot. Ray Crow from Oregon was publishing a newsletter. Connie Cameron from California was publishing a newsletter. There were a couple of printed publications coming out of Ohio. Don Keating publishing one of them. And so I thought to myself, well, why don't I throw my hat in the ring and compete in this arena of printed publications? And so I did. And so slowly but surely, all of those other newsletters went extinct. And so over this 24-year period, the Bigfoot Times is the only printed newsletter that is published and sent to a membership every month. So I'm very happy with that. And we have intelligent discussions about the topic every month. And in fact, more information on the PG film has been published in that newsletter than any other place in the world.
Really? That's interesting. I think I might have to look for that.
We were the first to publish an image of the truck that was in Bluff Creek that was owned by Bob Gimlin. It was first printed in the Bigfoot Times newsletter. We were the first to identify the individual that Roger Patterson spoke with at the Eureka Times Standard, because prior to that, the byline for the newspaper article, the initial publicity of the PG film, there was no byline. It was anonymous from the newspaper. And I was able to figure that out. We were the first to identify that individual and publish his picture too. And his name is Al Tostado. He's since passed on, but he wrote a second article about the PG film about a week after his initial article, which came out on October 21st. And so in the second article, he lifts passages from his first article and put it into the second article. Back in '67, if you did that as a newspaper reporter, that's called plagiarism. But if you're taking it from yourself, it's not plagiarism because it's you. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so in the second article, he put his name and I reasoned that by deduction, if he has the same passages from the second article that were in the first article, that must be the guy who wrote the article.
Right, that makes sense.
So that was originally all published in the Bigfoot Times newsletter. So we get really granular in the newsletter in terms of the itty bitty pieces that make up the PG film.
That's amazing, because I think I'd heard different information on that. Like somebody said that they were on horseback, and then somebody said they were in a truck. So having a picture of a truck is a good
Well,
thing to have as well.
Here, what most people don't realize is that they went down in Bob Gimlin's Chevy truck. I think it was a 1965 Chevy truck with dually wheels in the back, 2 wheels, 4 wheels in the back. And that in that truck, it had a sleepover cab. So Roger and Bob slept in the truck in the sleepover cab. And they had 3 small horses that were in the back. So they took 1 truck, 3 horses, and Bob and Roger. And so at nighttime, they were driving the truck over the roads, hoping to see something. And at daytime, they jumped on their horses, following Bluff Creek, hoping to see tracks. And eventually, they not only saw tracks, they saw the track maker.
That's awesome. Is there any other information that you'd like to share with us about the film?
There's so much about the film. It's just amazing. I think the biggest thing that most people don't realize, that who've never been to the film site, is they see the film either on a laptop or desktop, TV, or whatever the case may be, but it doesn't give you the depth of the film site. Once you get to the film site, you realize from the creek to the big tree in the back, there's a lot of real estate in between. I think we measured it from the big tree to the edge of the creek is about 272 feet, almost 300 feet. So that's a very long distance. It's almost, what is a football field is 300 feet, which is 100 yards. So it's almost a football field from the big tree that you see prominently in the background to the creek. That's how much space there is between just in that one section of the film site. It's a very big area.
And did they track backwards and see where the track started from?
Well, that's interesting. By the time I put the question out there, Roger Patterson was long gone. So you can't ask Roger. And so I believe I asked Bob Gimlin when I was up at the film site in October of 2004. I got back home and I phoned him. And I think it just kind of one of those things that popped into my mind. And I asked him about that, or maybe I asked him along earlier, but I did ask Bob Gimlin, and he told me that, he said, when we first saw Patty, the subject, he says, we did not know where she came from. And he said, we just saw the tracks from the creek to where she was walking away. So based on just common sense, one gets the impression that when she got to where she was when she was first seen, she was probably walking in the creek deliberately to avoid leaving tracks. Because Bob stated that, he says, we didn't know how she got to that point. We only know that we saw her at that point and started to walk away. And so, I mean, Sasquatch doesn't blink in and out of space. It has to get there somewhere physically. And the most logical way is to walk in the creek. And if you do that, you're going to eliminate leaving tracks. And so that would kind of tell you what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a very sentient, intelligent being that deliberately does certain types of behavior to avoid being seen or tracked.
I think one of our filmmaker friends, Jason Kinsey, has some footage up in Canada that he had taken where you could see footprints across the bottom of a lake that he thought were probably Bigfoot Sasquatch because they were very far apart. So that's very interesting, that you also say that they went into the creek. We do have another question from the chat room. Sherry wants to know, were there any tree breaks or stick art found there?
No, never. And in fact, prior to 67, if you go back to the original Bigfoot in California, back to 1958, back to Jerry Crew, I can't think of any reports of tree structures or tree breaks that have been noted that were in newspaper articles during that time. So all of that, the tree breaks, tree structures, that came later and from different parts of the country, not in Northern California. So I'm still scratching my head whether Bigfoot is making these tree structures. I'm sure they're busting branches, but whether they're making tree structures or whatever, I don't know about that, because you look at them, for an animal out there, there's a couple of things that motivates it. Any wild animal, food supply because they have to eat, forest coverage because they want to be concealed, and mate. So those are basically the three guiding principles of their life. And so some of these tree structures that I've seen many photos, I'm saying, are they doing this just out of pure boredom? Because they don't look like they would be a good sleeping quarters, because I mean, the rain would go right through them and get them wet. So I don't see that. So I'm still scratching my head. A lot of people say, well, this tree structures, that's evidence of Bigfoot. And I always say, well, it would be nice if we had an eyewitness who actually stated that they saw a Bigfoot building these tree structures and with footprints in the immediate vicinity. I've yet to see a case where it has all of those ingredients.
And the trees in California are a lot bigger than they are in other parts of the country as well. So that is something that I think about, just because the fact that they're really big around and really, really tall. They probably have a lot less foliage than the smaller trees that we have in other parts of the country.
That's actually a good point, because the trees in California or the Pacific Northwest in general, there's some really big trees.
And there's not a lot of ground cover in a lot of those forests.
That's correct.
Yeah, and like Minnesota, I know it has so much ground cover that you can barely even walk through it, and they have wild weeds that can burn your skin and all sorts of things. So, so yeah, definitely everything's different everywhere around the country.
Yes.
Okay, and so you were saying that you do have your Bigfoot Times newsletter. If somebody wanted to sign up for that, how would they do that?
Super easy. Just go to bigfoottimes.net and get a subscription. For under $20 a year, you get 12 newsletters in the mail, one every month. And the people who do get the newsletter, they're really pleased, because we're not just rehashing information that you see on the internet or on social media or Facebook. We had the latest issue, Sonia Horstman from Ohio had exclusive coverage of the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, which was last month. And then another lady, Suzanne F., I can't pronounce her last name, but she's also from Ohio. We had exclusive coverage on the Bigfoot Triangle meet from Ohio. And then the Michigan Bigfoot meet, which I attended and spoke at, we had exclusive coverage there for the readers, all in that newsletter. And you're not going to find that anywhere else. And I say, for the kind of money that people are spending on shirts and stuff, you could just drop one $20 bill and get a newsletter that keeps giving month after month. And so bigfoottimes.net, sign up, and you're done.
Especially if you can't make it to the conferences, because that's less than the price of a ticket.
Yeah, and with gas, what it is, it just seems to be going up and up and up. A lot of people are not traveling as much as they used to.
That's true. I don't know about you guys. I know that diesel's up over $5 a gallon for sure, and
Well,
the regular's going up that high too, just pretty soon.
Here in California, we have gas that is $6 a gallon, and up in the Bay Area, gas that's over $7 a gallon. So I feel the pain of people who have the sticker shock at the pumps.
Wow. You would think that the airlines would get really smart and drop their prices so everybody will want to fly instead. Then they can make some bank. Okay, we only have a few more minutes. Do you want to tell everybody how they can get a hold of you?
Well, unlike most Bigfoot websites, you have to dig and dig and dig to find contact information. On the Bigfoot Times Net website, right on the very top, my full name, my phone number, my email, my physical address, it's all there. So anyone could, and that phone number is my private number too. So you just dial away.
Wow, you're not scared of scammers, are you?
Not at all. In fact, I think that might be the hot ticket because I never get bogus calls. I get real serious calls on the phone.
And then I have one more question about your newsletter. You said that you have exclusive coverage on all these events. So you have people, are they people that are members that are reporting back to you, or do you have specific people that you have going to these events for you?
No, these people, I just post on Facebook. I said, well, if you happen to be going to this meet, would like to see if you'd mind covering the meet for us for the Bigfoot Times. And it just happened to be the last edition, the June edition, which just came out. We had two people that just happened to be members that said, oh, sure, I'll write something up for the newsletter. And they did.
Okay. Well, I know we are very thankful that you came onto our show this evening, and we're thankful to John Montoya of the Midnight Squatchers for bringing you to our attention. Thank you, John and April. We appreciate all of you.
John Montoya gets the newsletter.
Yeah, he's actually a pretty good friend of ours. We love him and April a lot. So we took him very seriously when he suggested that we contact you.
Well, I appreciate it very much.
Okay, and next week, everybody, I know you're going to be so excited to know that we have convinced Vic Cundiff, who is a very, very big dogman expert, to come on the show and talk with you guys and share his information and answer all of your Dogfoot questions that you have been burning to get answers to for the past couple months anyway. So make sure that you tune in for that and make sure that you have your questions ready because this is your chance to get them answered. All right. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for letting me host your show because Jen couldn't talk. And I think I did okay. Don't come at me if I didn't.
I'm just going to explain that I have my landlord here fixing some things very loudly. That's why Tammy did such a great job. Good job, Tammy. Big, good job, Tammy. Good job.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll have you again soon. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.